Hey everybody, you may have noticed it's looking pretty grim out there in the patriotic, gun-loving USA. Income inequality is off the charts. House prices are through the stratosphere. Health insurance execs are curling their evil mustaches, denying coverage left, right, and center, and raking in billions. California is overrun with homeless encampments and is routinely on fire. Masked men in military fatigues are kidnapping people off the streets, workplaces, schools, churches, and their naturalization hearings. In short, our situation has become a bit untenable. I'm a software engineer by trade. I enjoy looking for patterns and abstractions in everything. A lot of discussion online is about details. People focus on the nitty-gritty of the current historical situation unfolding in front of their eyes. Understandably so. When riots erupt in California, internet mobs battle each other over whether all of the protesters are criminal scum that should be tear-gassed into oblivion, or if they're all peaceful hippies dancing in the streets. Not many people lift above the fray to examine the economic, political, and cultural trends that lead people to take to the streets. The images of burning cars or lines of police firing tear gas are enough for most people to simply pick a side. I like to lift above the dramatic, evocative images. I think that the very real authoritarian backsliding in the United States did not spontaneously appear. The immigration crackdowns, homelessness, drug abuse, broken healthcare are all symptoms of a deeper underlying disease. In order to lay out my thoughts, I'd like to first get everyone on board with a few common rules about humans and the systems we build. First, humans, like all other animals, are selfish. Our most basic instinct is self-preservation. Every evolutionary step we have taken since our days in the savannah has been to ensure our own survival. At first, we simply developed tools like spears and clubs and banded together into tribes. These tribes were so successful at keeping us alive that we evolved to view them as an extension of ourselves. Then, as we invented agriculture, we developed a drive to accumulate food and essentials for the winter. This drive to stockpile resources is a survival mechanism that got corrupted by the abundance of the modern world. Like any other human attribute, some possess it in higher qualities than others. On one end of the scale is a minimalist that lives out of their camper with only one set of utensils. On the other is a hoarder that is unable to resist the basic drive to own more and more stuff. When someone with this personality is driven and capable and recognizes the value of money, they can leverage this trait into unimaginable wealth. Here's a second rule I'd like to convince everybody of. Any economic or political system in which humans participate tends to concentrate power in a minority of hands. The rise of billionaire robber barons in the guise of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos is not an aberration. It is an inevitable end result of a system in which advantages can be gained and leveraged. This is because whenever any person gains an advantage over others, they can leverage that advantage to gain more advantages. Take as an example a restaurant owner, Anna, that has a wildly successful restaurant. Naturally, she starts opening locations all throughout the city, increasing her profits. She can then create a franchise to increase those even further. Anna then uses that wealth to buy up some of the suppliers she uses to source her food, allowing her to lower prices and undercut competition, leading to more profits. Once other chains begin to struggle, Anna begins buying those up as well, and on it goes until we have our very own robber baron restaurateur. The same process applies to the accumulation of political power. A talented social person, Ben, does some legwork and gets elected to city council. Once there, he builds relationships with companies by easing regulations. Ben makes compromises to support their fellow council members' harmful initiatives in exchange for future support. At the end of the term, he runs for state senate, and supported by his fellow council members and corporate backers, along with name recognition, wins that seat. This process repeats until Ben is at the center of a large web of backers, supporters, and favors and becomes almost impossible to dislodge. Political power is now centralized in a small group of similarly minded, ambitious individuals. Obviously, not everyone is capable of going down this path. Only those with extreme ambition and a flexible morality can leverage their way to the top. The problem is, there's no shortage of individuals like this in human societies. This is one of the main reasons we've been ruled by kings, pharaohs, tsars, and emperors for most of human history. This is also the reason most of these rulers were megalomaniacs that suppressed and dominated their societies. The people that climb the ladder of power will more often than not use that power to make the overall society worse, simply because of their psychology. We did not see widespread progress and betterment of humanity as a whole until we invented a system that could limit the impact of these rules. That system is called democracy. The Industrial Revolution exploded our progress, but it never would have happened if not for the Glorious Revolution that preceded it. A coalition of merchants and varied mercantile interests forced the English monarchs to cede power to a parliament. This led to better property rights and the ability of inventors and entrepreneurs to reap the benefits of their work, which in turn led to the invention of the democratic system and the world we know today. To bring this back to modern times, my central claim is that the reason everything is broken is because the US democracy has been eroded from within. Unless we fix this underlying systemic issue, everything will continue to deteriorate more and more rapidly. So let's look at how the US democracy is supposed to function. In the US, we have three major players: the people, the government, and the free market. In a healthy democracy, the people have the most power. The reason this is healthy is because it is the arrangement that spreads power over the most hands, the opposite to the rule of kings. The people are represented by their government and can influence it directly through voting, protesting, and direct contact with their officials. The people also influence the free market through direct participation and supply and demand. The only thing that prevents the concentration of economic power in this system is the hand of the federal regulator. If this didn't exist, the rules I outlined earlier would inevitably lead to the emergence of robber barons and complete dysfunction of the free market. So the people entrust the government to regulate the free market through incentives, such as financial and tax breaks for desirable industries, and punishments, such as fines, busting monopolies, and possibly imprisonment. With the advent of neoliberalism in the late 1970s, the people were convinced over time that this system was too hard on the free market. Trickle-down economics actually rebranded concentration of wealth as being a good thing for society. As a result, over 5 decades, the power of the people over their government and the market withered, while the market and the government found new ways to exert power over the people. Politicians and corrupt judges have gerrymandered the life out of any state they could, opposed any changes to the voting system, used vast amounts of money on propaganda and ads against candidates that refused to back their corrupt system, and are now resorting to violent crackdowns on dissent. Meanwhile, the super rich have purchased the social media companies we use, weaponizing their algorithms to divide us. Monopolies and mergers are running rampant through our markets, squashing competition. The biggest companies have become gigantic, multi-headed beasts that have had to invent new names for themselves like Meta or Alphabet. For-profit propaganda like Fox News has continuously brainwashed the most gullible of us. Instead of the government regulating businesses, the mega wealthy now control the government. They employ armies of lobbyists. They give overt bribes, now sanctioned by the Supreme Court. They use their bottomless coffers to advertise on behalf of their puppet senators and representatives. They employ former politicians in cushy jobs and as lobbyists. The government no longer even dares to regulate the market. Instead of voters picking politicians, the politicians now pick the voters via gerrymandering. If people protest, they are met by a phalanx of police and clouds of tear gas. Politicians feel so safe they don't even bother holding town halls or defending their actions anymore. The free market no longer works properly because competition is not allowed. Boycotts of specific companies still work. However, so many companies are just part of an umbrella monopoly that it's practically impossible to do any meaningful damage with a boycott. The politicians we elect need to begin healing the rot at the core of our democracy before they stand any chance of passing meaningful reforms. Any pro-people bill will not make it through a political system that doesn't care about the will of its citizens. We need real political reform. We need to systematically remove the levers by which the government and the super-rich control us, while strengthening the power we have over our own politicians. These are some of the most impactful reforms. Our voting system. The way we vote has concentrated political power in two corrupt parties, neither of which represents a majority of the people. Ranked choice, or better yet, single transferable vote, will make it much easier for candidates not beholden to the two parties to win and keep their seats. True required public funding for elections would completely remove the ability of wealth to influence politics. Every candidate should be required to use public funds, without exception. Anti-gerrymandering reform, possibly in the form of independent redistricting commissions, would make state legislatures much more representative of their constituents. There are many other reforms that would help tremendously, and I will go over them in further videos. GOP has become an authoritarian cult. It is a lost cause. We must instead spend all our efforts to primary all incumbent Democrats that oppose this approach and field independents against those we cannot dislodge. The United States is at a critical juncture. We can fully succumb to oligarchy and authoritarianism, or we can use this as an opportunity to heal our system and make it even stronger than it was before. Make the system work for the people once again. Heal the system, save democracy.